You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Oh, hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to my show. We are not doing a call-in show. We're just chit-chatting tonight. And I have a wonderful guest. His name is Brian Nichols. You may know him from The Brian Nichols Show. How are you this evening, Brian?
I am doing great, Tricia Stewart. How are you?
I'm good. I had some technical difficulties because I'm a girl and technical stuff is hard.
No, I think it was more so that the internet, I think actually here we've figured it out. The feds just don't want us to have the conversation. So they were just messing with us behind the scenes.
That's it. There's just too much liberty and they can't take it, right?
There it is. Yep.
So I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about you. If you guys don't know who Brian is, he hosts a show. It's on the We Are Libertarians network. It's the Brian Nichols Show. It's pretty much everywhere you can find podcasts. And Brian is a consummate professional. So I thought, let him come on Gingerarchy where I'm not a professional and let's see what happens.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this.
So I know about you, Brian, but maybe some people listening don't. So tell us a little bit about your liberty journey. Where did you start out politically? What brought you around to being a libertarian?
Yeah, so I started out my political journey, I would say, probably much like a majority of folks in the traditional like Ron Paul liberty movement, and that would be from the right. But I came more from just a traditional GOP household, more so because my dad was a legislator for 15 plus years. And it was one of those things where politics was just one of those things of life. I mean, being in the car and dad being on the phone with, Chuck Schumer discussing trying to get funding for a retaining wall in Hubleton, New York.
Wait, back up, Brian. So I interrupt a lot.
Go for it.
I'm trying to be a professional interviewer, but I always fail at it. And I stop people short. Wait, how was your dad? What type of legislator was he again?
County legislator. So up in northern New York. So obviously every single state has different variations, and actually every single county has different variations. In New York especially, you'll have a couple different ways that counties will run. Either you'll have a town supervisor, which would basically be like the mayor essentially of like but for the township in this case. And then you'd have a board of supervisors that would report to that one individual. And then the other way is a county legislator, and it'd be more of your traditional parliamentary system where you have different districts will elect a person to go to a county seat, and then you'll have one person chair that board. So my dad was the chair of the board for a few years, and he was also a member of the legislature for 15 years or so. So pretty much my entire life was just me living and experiencing politics and talking politics. That's all we really talked about when we were growing up, because that was what I lived. I mean, that was just life. So for me, that was the norm. That's what I expected, and that's kind of where my head was always at, in terms of the way I approach politics, until I really started to think for myself. And that was going, outside of, I'm not saying, I was brainwashed by any stretch, but, it's one thing to grow up in that world, but also the entire area that I lived in, it's a very, just by its very nature, a conservative area. So being able to get outside of there and go to meet new people, I think this is one thing too we're seeing across the board, Tricia, is just the more that you get to communicate and speak with people that aren't like you and that don't share the same experience as you do, I think the better rounded as a person we can become. And then we speak more to the way we can approach problems we see versus just trying to, get our ideologies to pinhole into every single situation we find ourselves in out there. So I ended up kind of doing that when I was looking at the problems of the world. And I, first kind of had my blinders knocked off by the Paul family. First, really Ron Paul in 2008, hearing him on the debate stage, like most folks, but that wasn't really my moment that I kind of had the oh, maybe I'm not this Republican, but more so it was actually his son when I really kind of, oh, okay, this is, now I get it now, was when he was filibustering back for the trying to get drones not being allowed to be striked on American citizens, unilaterally from the executive. So that was kind of my first oh, maybe this is a new way of thinking, a new kind of approach to politics that at that point I was kind of alien to. And candidly, Trisha, I think is mostly because, like most folks out there, you do grow up in this kind of it's a bipartisan world. You have Republicans and Democrats, and we're taught that. That's, you go to school, you're taught it's the Republicans and Democrats, and you learn the political history of the United States through that lens. And there's never really any context given to what else is out there. And whenever you do hear of the third parties, it's usually painted through the lens of some fringe or conspiratorial lens. And that makes it so they instantly are discredited from the onset. So the fact that I was able to remove my blinders for a little bit, I'm actually kind of proud of myself, because I look back to where my mindset was back then. I was GOP college Republicans president for 2 or 3 years. Like,
I totally
things like
see that.
yeah, like things. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like things like that, I was totally in that mindset. Like that was just, that made sense to me. Like that was, and that's part of the problem, I think, is that we as libertarians, we think too much, and like it just makes sense. And why doesn't everybody else think like we do? And we forget that a lot of other people are approaching politics in that exact same lens. So instead of just saying, why don't you get it? Like, we have to try to break into what got them to where they are to begin with. And I think that's why we're having more success now, is when we're approaching conversations in that perspective versus just, I'm right, hear why I'm right. That's not as productive, I don't think.
I quite agree. I actually came from a very similar place and school of thought, which might surprise some people because I'm a full-blown anarchist now. But that's not as scary as you think. So, you could maybe listen to some other shows, or I could explain it to you if you're interested. But my parents were heavily involved in the Republican Party. I actually was a Republican delegate at one point in time. Volunteered for the McCain campaign.
Do you feel icky from that, Trisha? Does it ever make you feel icky?
It does. Yeah, it does. Like, there was a while I was ashamed, but now I'm just going to own it because I'm just so not that person anymore. Mm-hmm. But it also does, I think you probably touched on this a little bit, it does help me get better perspective. Yeah. I lived in the left-right paradigm for a long time. I get why people think that way. And then, I took my journey from, being a libertarian, kind of like just a minarchist, then to an anarchist where I was not even going to vote, then kind of came back around, I wouldn't say to a pragmatist, but more of an anarchist that's like, okay, this is the world I live in. Mm-hmm. How can I affect change? And so approaching it in that whole, I'm an edgelord, you're stupid because you believe this, and here's what's right, and you're an idiot, is a really poor way to approach things, because you're never going to get people to love liberty if you approach them that way. Who wants to listen to somebody that is a complete asshole? And so when I listen to your show, I appreciate the fact that you try to reach out and try not to be just an ass to people that might be kind of in the Republican camp. And you maybe lean a little right. But I think that it's important when you're reaching out to people to not discount their ideas and feelings. They're valid in certain ways. There's a reason they got there. But I think we can expose them to liberty. And like you said, Rand Paul is a starting point for a lot of people. I remember actually back in the day thinking that he was ridiculous, and I didn't understand why he would, buck the Republican Party on certain things. And he was good on a lot of things, but that whole surveillance and stuff, I didn't understand why he wanted the terrorists to win. Yep. It was that bad, Brian.
Well, and here's the thing too. You mentioned, and this is my perspective of, I kind of was brought in by Rand Paul, and others were brought in by Ron Paul, right? But I mean, let's look at, somebody like a Larry Sharpe, right? Larry Sharpe, I would say Larry Sharpe, if we were to ask a majority of libertarians, 9 times out of 10, they're going to give a thumbs up to Larry, right? Now, if you go and ask, I like Larry, right? But if you go to ask libertarians, the same exact people, do you like Gary Johnson? What do you think? Like 50% ballpark? 40%?
It depends on what type of libertarian you're asking.
But let's just say that they're the exact same ones that we asked with the Larry Sharpe one. Let's just pretend, we pulled every single libertarian right now, the heartbeat of the Libertarian Party. In my gut, I'm just going to say, I think Gary Johnson's numbers would be a little bit lower, right, than Larry's.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to, well, okay, hold up. Did you know that Larry Sharpe was brought into the Libertarian Party by Gary Johnson? Mm-hmm. So, and this is why it's important for us to understand that nobody's going to be what we consider to be the perfect libertarian, is that what the messaging is from a certain libertarian, while it might not be the messaging you like or the messaging you want to see, it is effective in reaching to other people who are out there that we can then bring in and try to teach, the different perspectives, or to try and help convince them on the other areas that they're not libertarian, right? So, was Gary a perfect libertarian messenger? No. Was he articulate at all in terms of how to convey what it meant to be a libertarian? No. I would say being a fiscal conservative and a social liberal is not the way to describe what it means to be a libertarian.
Right.
But as the party face in 2016, Gary had an opportunity, and his opportunity did bring in folks like Larry Sharpe. And I think we cannot discount the impact of trying to build bridges versus just going out with guns a-blazing, trying to show how right you are. And it does require us to enter conversations into where people are already having those conversations in their mind. So not going in and saying, this is what you need to be concerned about. This is what the number one issue is that you need to be concerned about right now. Instead, say what's on your plate, because when we can figure out what their issue is, right, then we can start to address that issue. And then once we solve that issue, and this goes back to like fundamental sales, then you can become that trusted person that they're going to look to for other things. And then we can start to focus on those like really hardcore libertarian things that we get all, excited about in our group chats.
It's funny because there's been something going around for several years, and I think it was brought up by somebody that I won't mention his name, but it's called bottom unity. So have you heard this, Brian?
I've heard the term, yes.
It's not about butt stuff, people. But it's basically about the people in the party, and there's several factions. And the one thing about the Libertarian Party that I think is different than the R's and the D's is that there's a lot of people that just believe in individual rights, and they're not going to just blindly follow the party because, this is what the party says and we have allegiance, much like the Republicans or Democrats would. The problem with that being is we can't agree on anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Individualists unite.
I don't mean to cut you off, but and that's what drives me crazy is because we're not even in a position where we should be having this kind of we are so small in terms of making an impact in really any significant way that this petty infighting of we don't want these people in our room. Stop it. What are we doing?
Yeah, we don't even have people.
Exactly. And that it's so counterproductive, Tricia. I want to see liberty impact people's lives right now. I don't want to see this constant as long as we talk about the exact utopia that we want to see, if we can craft it perfectly in our make-believe land, then that's all that matters. No, I'm sorry. Let's talk about now. What's happening now?
It's funny you say that. I went down the path like a lot of libertarians do. I was a, big L libertarian. I went to a minarchist, and I became a voluntarist and anarchist. And there was a time where I was voting is violence, blah, 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 parroted everything I'd heard from the people that, had influenced me. And then I did have a friend reach out, Tom Arnold, actually, and he said, why don't you vote? It's self-defense. I want you to read some Rothbard. I want you to read this. And I began to think that I could, wax poetic all day, but it didn't make a big difference. But, if I worked on legislation that would take nonviolent criminals out of the system and put them back with their families, it would probably make a bigger influence and impact in the world. And so I started to see political action as a positive.
I love that.
I still think there's times when it's just it doesn't matter. But it does matter to me to give people a different idea, which is what the Libertarian Party does, even if it comes to politicians and it's not issue voting. And so ballot access is a huge thing, especially here in Ohio. So just letting people know that there's a different party there means people actually have to vote for libertarians. And we didn't pass that threshold this time. So we lost that in Ohio, which totally sucks. But what do you think about just the party being not super effective as in getting elected, although we do have quite a few local libertarians elected, but in a beacon for liberty, giving people the idea that there's a third party and there's something else out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let's kind of start. We'll rewind a little bit, right? So my day job, I'm a sales guy, sales executive in the greater telecommunications industry. And one of the things when we're talking about, when you're trying to build a customer base, right? One of the things you want to focus on first is, who's your target? So I think first we need to effectively decide as a greater and if we're going to focus, I guess in this case, is like the Libertarian Party, just for the sake of like how would you actually get policy into action? In this case, if it's a political means, and it's going to have to be through the LP or the GOP or Democratic Party, but that's a different conversation for a different day, I think. But for like if we're looking at the LP, right, then you'd have to say, okay, well, beyond just being there, right, as the alternative, there has to be something else. And actually, I had this conversation with Brad Palumbo, and one of the things we talked about was, well, think about it, right? Or actually, it wasn't Brad Palumbo, it was Mark Claire, good old Mark Claire, over on Lions of Liberty. And we were
I like Mark.
Yeah. And we were talking about, it was okay, if you were to have right there, folks who were to say you have Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and then if you were to say, what's the other one? Like, what, RC Cola, right? There's probably folks out there who they like RC Cola, but they're what, maybe 1%, 2%, 3%. And I was like, but here, let's go live. And we looked and we were on air. There is diehard, passionate RC Cola Facebook groups. And it's wild, like thousands of people in these groups, right? But think about the overall impact that RC Cola is having in terms of markets and market share. And it's not. And the reason is because there really hasn't been anything that RC Cola has presented of value that people are going to say, I'm going to go ahead and make my change in behavior to stop voting, in this case, buying Pepsi and Coke, and to go buy RC Cola. So I say all that because just the presence alone of a third party, in this case the LP, is not alone, or is not enough, rather.
Right.
We cannot alone just be the alternative. There has to be a reason that people are willing to give us their vote. And part of it is it has to be this idea of trust. People need to trust that when they vote for us, that vote goes with something. And when they look at the Republicans or Democrats, for better or for worse, they know that their vote has more weight in the actual impact of promoting or standing against particular policies that probably mean the most to them. So when they look at us, they just see us more often than not as kind of this just alternative vote. But we need to be something more than that. So what I've been suggesting, and I know we've been seeing a lot of libertarians out there, the Spike Cohens of the world, and as we mentioned, Larry Sharps of the world, has been we need to start focusing and promoting these local libertarian candidates who have won. But number two, the policy changes that they're able to get into action, and the positives that are coming from that. Because when you're in sales, one of the things we talk about is the value of storytelling. And when we can start telling the value of libertarian policies because of the wins we're having, not just from the electoral success, but also the policy success and the consequences of that thereafter, and that is actually helping real people, and we can tell those stories, then that's going to show people, okay, we can trust that this stuff works, that this vote for the person with the L next to their name, it's not just the vote for RC Cola. It's a vote for an actual solution. To your point, it's a vote to get, a nonviolent criminal, air quotes on the word criminal, right? Get them home with their families. It's a vote to try and end, the focus on going after people for the color of their skin, and instead focus on, how are we spending our time, energies, and efforts? Are we trying to help people? Are we trying to? And that's where we can have a conversation with our friends on the left, right? Like, I am completely empathetic to the argument of, well, how can we spend trillions of dollars in overseas wars when we have people here who are suffering every single day? I'm like, I hear you. Like, there's a reason that meme of like, oh, where did your stimulus bill go to? And it's like the gender studies program over in Pakistan. Yeah. It's like, yeah. And your average person, they should be pissed off about that. Like, there's no reason that your money should be going that way. And I think we're seeing a more growing kind of belief across the American electorate that's like, there's something wrong, right? So it's on us to not just be the ones saying, hey, we have the answers. Now it's on us to actually start showing that our answers are the actual solutions to the problems. And then once we do that, people are going to start to give us not just their vote, but they're going to give us their trust. And that's when we can actually make some real positive change.
I think we can do that definitely, like down the ballot with local elections, because what you're talking about, I think a lot of people look at it as some sort of populism, which may be true. Like, the messaging of Gary Johnson. Right? It might have been a little bit of populism,
That's the point, though. We have democracy. Yeah. That's the whole point right now. And this is when people are like, they're like, well, democracy is the best thing ever. It's like, well, get ready from rampant populism, because the only way to be, truly a successful democratic candidate is to get the will of the populism into action. And that's all it is.
Well, I hope as libertarians we can we can ascertain the problem the same way they do, but we can identify the solution better.
Right.
We actually, what's really cool is we have a mayor in Ohio. She's from Plymouth, Ohio. She's a libertarian elected mayor, and they happen to have a mayor's court in this town. Do you know what she did? She threw out speeding tickets, like absolved them. So what did she do? She put money back in the people's pockets. Like, that's real action. I love that kind of stuff. So when people tell
story, yes,
yeah, she's amazing. Her name's Cassandra Fryman, by the way. She's really
What's her name? Cassandra
Fryman, Plymouth, Ohio. We actually have another libertarian mayor here in Ohio, and I cannot remember his name.
Uh-oh. There goes Trisha's mic.
Yes, my mic is back now. But I think that stuff I think that's important. And people say, well, what does electing a candidate do? Blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. That directly affected a lot of people in her town. So that had more of an impact than me, waxing poetic on the internet. So,
well, and think about that, right? So so now my sales brain, that's why I wanted to have her on the show right now. Because this is how.
Oh, she's amazing. I can hook you up with her.
Oh, so we're going to circle back because this is where my head's at, right? So now let's just find one, two, three people that she was able to get their tickets wiped out for nonviolent offenses, right? Mm-hmm. Then to have let's give Matt Kibbe a call from Free the People, have him sit down with him and have them tell, hey, I was facing trying to pay my rent and to put food on the table for my kids, and I had a $1,500 traffic ticket for something that I didn't even do.
And that can make or break some households.
Yes. And then to say, and until, somebody saw how stupid that this was, how it was literally going to crush my family. And that was this solution from Cassandra Fryman, and that's something that we can then tell the story, make that a real thing that real people can relate to. Like that's, and here's the thing, it drives me crazy. Libertarians, we can talk all day long, but are we talking to the people? Like, we can talk about non-aggression principles all day long, right? But if I say that to an average person on the street, do you think they know what that means? No. They're like, what? A non-aggression?
They're like, but do you win?
Right. What are you going to do for me? Right. Yeah. And that's what we have to start being able to answer that question.
Yes. Yeah. In simple terms too, because I think a lot of libertarian solutions, they can be really long-winded.
Oh gosh.
But and I find this an issue, and no offense to my fellow libertarians that are mostly male. They tend to go on and on and on. And I think sometimes it's okay to say less and mean
less
more.
Is more.
So I think we need to learn that as a whole, just to say, saying something as a simple solution isn't necessarily a horrible thing. We don't need to quote, the anatomy of the state to tell somebody why nonviolent offenses shouldn't put somebody in a jail cell.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's not that hard. Okay, Brian, we're going to talk a little bit then about philosophy because, we're preaching a little bit to the choir. So let's do it. So you came from the right. You consider yourself a libertarian now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you're a minarchist. Is that correct?
I say, yeah, I guess minarchist, classically liberal. I mean,
you're okay.
Yeah.
Could you define your political beliefs? Like
don't hurt people, don't take their stuff.
Okay.
Literally, that's it. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. I know it sounds so cheesy, and I know we just, but hey, that at the end of the day, and this is why I hate like getting to the whole, what's your specific idea of who you are? Because I guess here's the thing, right? I get anarchism. I'm on board with the ideas. I get it. When you're talking about at the end of the day, how do societies function? When you look at the market, is Walmart forcing me to go to Walmart? No. Is Target forcing me to go to Target? No. But I also understand that we are here. We got to this point where we are today for some reason, right? There's a vacuum that is created, and there are evil son of a bitches out there who they see that, and they will take advantage of those systems. And by just the very nature of that vacuum, we get at times this. And how do we prevent that, right? And I guess that's where we libertarians, and I'll put the greater small L in front of libertarian in this case, just to kind of cover my basis. But that's where I think we get too lost, is that we're trying to focus on how we're focusing on the end question, right? Of how do we get this into action perfectly, and it will run efficiently versus like trying to deconstruct how we got to where we are today and to avoid getting back to that point to start. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. Like I might have some points of disagreement about that because I think that
I am not coming in like this. Like I am firmly saying this is my principled position on everything, and I'm 100% right. Because
I think a lot of people point to corporations and say, but this leads to this, and I just think modern day corporations are a complete product of the state. But and I don't think that anarcho-capitalist, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, by the way, for anybody listening that even gives a crap about what that is. So I'm not like a mutualist or whatever, but I call myself a voluntarist. So, but I also do not think that utopia is ascertainable in this lifetime. So I do not think that is the answer to everything. And I'm perfectly happy to live with nonviolent people in whatever system, as long as they don't mess with me. Yeah. And I always say, for the anarchists that are diehard and mostly people that sit on their basement on the internet, you can type away all day. I'm fine living with an anarchist. If we get down to the point where it's just police and courts, then we can have that argument that day. Until then, I will fight alongside them to get to that point. And I don't really understand why that's a bad thing.
Yeah, we're not even in the ballpark right now. And that's where it drives me crazy. Like I'll see people who they will disown certain individuals in the movement because they're not the textbook example of, name whoever thinker it is that you want to support that day. Like that they're not toying the exact mantra that they were saying whenever they wrote it. It's like, stop. Like we need to be able to, number one, understand that we have to communicate the things that we're talking about to the people that we're talking to today. And if that means that we can't speak the libertarian language 100% pure, and that you need to be able to frame not the principles, but frame the way you're talking about the ideas to people differently so they understand it based in the context of today. And if that makes somebody come across as not being a pure libertarian, then sue me. I'm not a pure libertarian, I'm not going to be that person. My job is to be, and I'll say, the way I've approached things, my job has been to get more people to ask, tell me more about liberty. I want to learn more. Right now, we aren't even at that point yet because we just are so focused on only letting the people in who are going to toy and really make sure that they're echoing back the exact thing we want them to say back to us. And that's not a way to engage people who are going to be, in my sales brain, the long-lasting customer. Who's going to be the long-return customer? Is it going to be the person who you made feel terrible and made them feel stupid? Or is it the person who you kind of helped feel that, hey, here's where I went wrong in my experience, and here's where I was able to learn things along my path, and here, I'm going to help you too. Like, who do you think is going to be the more influential person down the road? And that's where I think we lose people. Because we know how right we are, and we want people to know how right we are. But in our coming across to tell people how right we are, we become demeaning, and we completely lose people because instead of asking people questions and trying to solve problems, we become these people who are just out there screaming at people about how right our ideas are and how stupid are you not for listening to us. Like, listen to us. Our logic and reason is sound, you ignorant plebes. Like, listen to us.
Yes. It's funny. I always think of especially my fellow anarchists, but my fellow libertarians too. It's like, nobody's going to listen to us if we tell them how stupid they are in the first sentence.
Bingo.
And maybe we're the stupid ones if we do that. Anarchy and liberty, libertarianism, they should be really attractive to people. They shouldn't scare the shit out of people,
Yep. Well, and I hate this. I always do this, but at the end of the day, everything, whether we like it or not, is rooted in sales. We either are selling an idea, a product, a service, a principle, yourself, whatever it may be, right? You are selling something. And in this case, we're trying to sell the value of our ideas. So let's go back. I have a sales team that I coach, right? If I were to teach my sales team to call in to every prospective customer and in learning what they have for their current infrastructure, tell the person that's the IT director that they are stupid, that their company is at risk for hacks, or that their cybersecurity network is a mess, and that they've done a terrible job, do you think that person is going to want to engage in a more thoughtful conversation to learn how we can help them? No. Click. Phone is hung up, and now we're on to the next, and we're probably on a do not call list, right? Instead, if we were able to approach the conversation saying, hey, listen, I know based on, and let's bring this back to politics, right? I know based on the, person like yourself who, find themselves voting conservative, let's say, that maybe you believe in X, Y, and Z principle, but let's, look and see, have you really gotten X, Y, and Z principle from the GOP? And objectively let them, answer that question and say, hey, well, listen, I know that I used to vote GOP too until I learned that they weren't really going to do anything different. So I started to look for alternatives, and I found myself supporting, libertarian candidates. Hey, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, I'd love to, show you one of the candidates running in our area. They're really focused on ending the lockdowns. If you'd like to be involved in their email list or something like that, or just learn more, let me know. I can shoot you a Facebook link. That's more effective and it might make us uncomfortable, right? But that's okay, because if we're able to get them to then enter into a situation where it doesn't feel hostile, it doesn't feel forced, and rather it feels like, oh, well, now it's empathetic. The person's approaching this through a lens of common ground and understanding, and they know that I'm probably asking a few questions myself, and I have uncertainty in my perspectives. Well, then all of a sudden it's not a really awkward conversation. Instead, it's more so you're just helping the person along the way. And that's kind of what we have to do. Stop. And anytime you meet a salesperson, be a consultant almost, like kind of try to figure out how can you help the person find the answers to the questions that they're asking. And if we can point them in the right way, I think we're going to be fine.
Well, Brian, I'm in sales as well, and I quite agree. I don't think I've ever sold anything to somebody by verbally abusing them. I mean, right? Unless they wanted it, but hey.
Ew.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you now. We're going to ask some things about Brian Nichols. So you've been doing your show for what, about 3 years?
Oh my God, just over 3 years. We started in January of 2018, Tricia.
Okay, being a libertarian podcaster, which every libertarian podcast, but you've had some pretty good success. So you've surpassed some of the. Are you a real libertarian if you don't have a podcast? But who would be some of your favorite podcasters right now, and who would be some of your liberty heroes? Like, who do you really look up to?
Oh, I love this question. Okay, so for podcasts, my goodness, my short list. Let's see. You're welcome, Michael Malice.
Yeah, he's funny.
Breaking Boundaries. Brad Palumbo. Chris Spangle, obviously with his rebranded. We Are Libertarians. Yeah. Now the Chris Spangle
Now he's
Show.
Fancy.
Now he's fancy. That's right. I do like Eric July quite a bit. For canon's sake,
I've interviewed him before.
Yeah, I'm looking. I really want to get him on the show. Fritz Cass is great. Obviously, you, Ginger, he is fantastic. I know. Kitty on Liberty. I'm a big fan of Matt
sure.
Kitty. He does a lot of great work over at Free the People. Mark, Claire, and Brian and John Odermatt over at Lions of Liberty. They have 3 amazing shows. Muddy Water, Spike Cohen.
Yes.
Yes, Spike and Matt, they do great work. Remzo, our good buddy Remzo, also We Are Libertarians on the run. He's been sick. He's back though. I got to.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't you take over his show while he was sick?
I did. I had a couple of guest hosting. It was an honor. I love Remzo.
I love Remzo too. I've been on a show before, and he's funny. He makes me laugh.
He's great. He's so thoughtful. And I always feel like after I'm done talking to Remzo that I've just talked to one of the most wise people. Who is 3 or 4 years younger than me.
Did you ever watch him on Ben Stein's gig?
Yes, and that's just so cool. I tell my dad that one of my good buddies is on Ben Stein's show frequently. My dad's a huge fan of Ben Stein, just from the days of Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
And my dad got so uber jealous. But there you go, Remzo. Yeah, that. But I'm a big fan of Remzo. I love Part of the Problem. Dave Smith. I think he does great work. Radical, Shane Hazel. My goodness, trying to think. I
want to talk to him. I think you talked to him recently, didn't you?
Yeah, and actually we having Shane on again sometime here in the near future.
He works on education and
yeah, he's running right now for governor of Georgia.
Awesome.
So Shane's doing great work. I do also listen to Ben Shapiro. I think it's important.
He's so right. I got to tell you though, I can appreciate anybody of any political stripe, and I can just compartmentalize things. Like I don't get triggered very easily. But the one day I was listening to Ben and Remso, it was and he talked about marijuana being a gateway drug, and I just was rolling.
It's important too, right? To listen to the people that we don't agree with.
Because,
his audience is huge, and there's people that he talks to that like they're like, oh my God, tell me more. So how do we talk to them in the same way to get them interested, right?
Well, and that's the thing. If you're going to disagree with somebody's point of view, you better damn well understand it, you know?
Bingo. Yep. So, I mean, I do listen to Ben Shapiro, Tom Woods, Tim Cass. I'm a big fan of them. Reason has a bunch of good podcasts.
Yeah, I listen to, yeah.
Actually, I'm having Nick Gillespie on the show again sometime soon. Peter sweet. Schiff. Yeah. And then Glenn Beck. I'm a big fan of Glenn Beck's stuff. He does a lot of great work too.
Glenn Beck, I have a special place in my heart for him because when I was a conservative, like I was big into talk radio growing up. I was a Rush baby and all that. And not that I have much, it was weird for me this week, with his passing, because I have a lot of disrespect for a lot of what he did, but at the same time, I have respect for what it did for me. Yep. But I kind of transitioned when I started thinking a little more differently over to Mark Levin. And then I went to Glenn Beck before I became like a big L libertarian and then eventually left that. But Glenn Beck, I kind of appreciated the way he did his show, his style. And so I don't know. I feel like maybe it's the end of the era for radio talk shows, like conservative talk show hosts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's becoming less sexy, I guess. So think about it like this way, right? Back in the day, and this guy actually goes to what's been happening just with the advent of the marketplace and the more competition we have. So back in the old days, right, with your traditional TV, you'd have 4 or 5 real big channels. You have your ABC, CBS, NBC, and then as that started to grow, those channels started to lose the gusto that they once had. Well, the same thing I think is going to happen here in conservative talk radio. You had the Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck. Heck, we'll even throw like Michael Savage in there, I guess, or
Michael Savage, that guy.
Oh, I know it. Hey, he would be on.
He was Savage like Nation. Alex Jones before Alex Jones was cool.
Yeah, he was always fun because I know if I've ever have late theater practice and we'd be getting out like Tech Week, and I'd be late at night in the car, he'd be on like the 11 o'clock hour, and you hear him talking about basically like he was Alex Jones before Alex Jones.
Yes.
So like now that kind of like that was a big deal, right? To not just have the microphone, but to now have the ears of quite literally millions of people just from the sheer fact that everybody in America pretty much has a radio, and B, you just need to dial the knob to go to whatever channel that you're, Talk 1400 up where I was from. That was where you just go ahead and you listen to it. And
1100 WTAM.
Exactly. And that was a chance for anyone in their mother to listen to a different perspective than what they were presented on the mainstream news. So to the question that you asked, Trish, I think just by that very nature, now that we have more voices out there with the advent of podcasting, I mean, Joe Rogan is one of the most listened to men in America, and he's never once had a talk show on television. He's never once, been a part of a major corporation network.
I think you're forgetting Fear Factor, Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about Fear Factor. It's funny. He used to have I think he looked weirder with hair,
Yes.
He had the weirdest.
Looks like a toupee, didn't it?
It did. It just doesn't fit. And I just see him nowadays, and you're like, nah, you should just had bald head, 4-year-old. Imagine Joe Rogan just wrestling kids bald, but no, Joe Rogan has the chance to have a conversation with folks that millions will hear beyond what your traditional, I would say, your traditional person on terrestrial media, like Brian Stelter's going to have. So we're seeing just this change right now, and I think podcasting and this YouTube / just alternative forms of content creation, whether it's the TikToks of the world or the libraries of the world, that the folks out there like Jeremy Kauffman invested in, we're going to start to see, I think, more and more folks start to offer their services out there. So the idea of having one or two just big names, it's not going to be as prevalent. It's going to be much more diversified. You're going to have, I think, more. It's going to be more like instead of Walmart and Target, it's going to be back in the old days of more mom and pop shops, if that makes sense.
No, and I think that's a good thing because it makes way for more free speech and more voices and different opinions. In a way, it makes me a little sad just because it's part of how I grew up. Mm-hmm. But it's dying audience. Honestly, the audience is aging out of those.
Literally. Yes.
And not that those voices couldn't be heard if they podcasted or whatever. A lot of people will adjust to, technology. But I was thinking about Joe Rogan. This is not actually on the list of questions I had for you, but I always ask people this because, obviously he's one of the most popular podcasts around that does, it's not just political. He'll interview anybody about anything. What do you think it is about Joe Rogan that makes him so popular?
Authenticity.
Oh my God, Brian, you're like the first person that said that automatically because I think it's the same thing. Yep. You feel like he's actually being the person he would be regardless.
People are, and I think this is what we're seeing right now across the board in America. People are, they're just in demand for some real, authentic human connection. Not just from their politicians, but from their neighbors, from their families, in an era of COVID where we haven't seen, your coworkers in some cases for over a year. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Around the NFL podcast, and Chris Wessling, who was one of the hosts in that show, he had cancer for 3 years, and he just passed away this past year, and that was a year after not seeing people in his office. And it's like, those are memories and people that you'll never and those memories are gone. Those moments are gone. So that plus you look at the decades and decades and decades, Tricia, of people being told one thing after another by these do-good politicians who end up doing the exact opposite. And it's like, well, who do I trust? And Trump, as just god-awful as he was in so many ways, to that person who voted for Trump, he was the person who was speaking straight to them. I mean, there was a really interesting part, and Dave Smith actually, he pointed this out, when Trump was going to one of the last rallies, like people yelling to him, like, I love you. And like, there's something, like, I'm not trying to say if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We have to acknowledge that it happened, right? And why did it happen? Because Trump made people feel heard. And to be feeling like you can be heard, it requires to feel that this person like genuinely cares about me. So what can we learn from that? I think we have to be able to look at folks like Joe Rogan, who when they're going out and they're talking to folks, it shows like, yeah, he genuinely wants to hear the other side. He genuinely has different perspectives that he wants to kind of grapple with. Like Joe Rogan, we've seen him kind of have these mental battles himself live on air. And that's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very like exposing and very awkward to like have your entire worldviews questioned in front of an audience of millions of people. But Joe Rogan does it on the constant. And I think people really like that. And one of the things I joke about on my show, Tricia, and I've kind of taken this from Rogan a little bit, is I say I try to ask the questions to my guests that your average person wants to ask, because I think too often your average person, like, they get stuck in the mindset of like, oh, it's a stupid question. Like, I don't want to ask the stupid question. But like, no, don't ask the stupid question. There's more people out there who want to ask the stupid question, because here's the thing. We've gotten too far away from asking the stupid questions. So now the stupid questions, they're not being asked. So now you have all these, these hoity-toity, quote unquote, experts who they're like, well, here's the common sense of why you need to wear a mask while you're playing in a concert ensemble band. If you're playing the saxophone, also why your saxophone has to be covered up by, 14 layers of fabric, to your average person saying, wait, it's a band. They're blowing wind through instruments. Wait, what? That's not a stupid question, folks. You can ask that question, and it's okay to ask that question. So I think to the question overall, Tricia, why Rogan? Because he is authentic. He's asking the questions people genuinely want to hear. One of the first conversations I listened to when it came down for this whole pandemic thing, I went to Rogan interviewing, I forget the guy's name, but he was an epidemiologist or a virologist.
Oh, yeah. My husband and I listened to that at the beginning of the pandemic, and we're like, oh, my God, we're going to die.
Right. But you know what? I was like, let's listen to Rogan. And that was weird. That was like the first thought I had. I was like, I'm not going to CNN. I'm not going to Fox News. I'm going to listen to Joe Rogan, talk to a guy who's an expert in this. Because I want to hear him ask the questions that I know I'm going to be asking.
Well, yeah, no, I think that speaks a lot to him. And I think that, when you were talking about Trump, that's true too, even though I believe he is who he is. I think a lot of people projected what they wanted to onto him. But he gave a certain sense of authenticity. I just don't think people realize that was a maniacal idiot. But you know what I mean? He was who he was. And so I think people do long for that. Back in the day, old Hollywood, you look at that, you look at entertainment. It was very polished. The people talked like they were British, even though they were American. And then you go into politics and, heaven forbid you learn about somebody's, JFK's affairs that we push that under the rug. And then we go into the 80s and 90s and we cover up, discrepancies, and we make people sound like they're more intelligent than they are. And in the end, I think with the age of the internet era, we just want what's actually real because we see it more and more each day. And like Joe Rogan does it. That's kind of like, when I'm talking to somebody, I'm not the smartest gal in the block. I'm definitely not an idiot, but I'm just going to say what I want to say. And if people don't like it and they want to listen to a talking head, well, you can listen to that podcast with the 4 other people that listen to it.
Yep.
But there's something to be said for speaking for everybody in the room and letting everybody listen to something and enjoy it and understand what's happening. I think it might have been Dennis that's on the main show, which is now the Chris Spangle show. He said something about diversity because I was arguing a little bit that diversity in and of itself is not a virtue. But he was saying it can be virtuous because he was talking, I think it was Dennis. If not, I'm giving him way too much credit. But he was talking about there was a group of research doctors, and all they did was hire the best candidates with the highest IQ and the best level of study. And what they found is that they no longer had people asking each other the dumb questions or just the average everyday man's questions, and that they all ignored some really obvious points. So that diversifying it to all type of people, maybe some of the people that weren't, the top of their class, ended up being a benefit because once you surround yourself by everybody that's exactly like you tend to get really stupid.
Yes. Well, and it's how do you approach the diversity, right? Do you approach it through a forced perspective or through an understanding in the marketplace that, yes, if you were to make yourself more diverse to that point, that you are putting yourself at a competitive advantage, right?
Yeah. So there's value in diversity if you mean it for value's sake instead of just for virtue's sake.
Bingo. Yes. Yeah. It's actually funny. My grandpa was a school board president. That is, back in the 80s, I think 70s. And he had a funny quote because he used to get yelled at by the superintendent because they would hire these teachers who, when they would look at the applications, this teacher, they'd have a C+ grade from their college, and then they would throw out these stellar A candidates. And my grandpa did it on purpose because he's like, I don't want somebody who it was easy for them. He's like, we want people who they had to learn, and it was difficult for them to learn because they knew how to struggle. They knew how to learn different ways. It wasn't just it makes sense for me, because we need kids out there who are going to who aren't going to be able to learn it as easy.
Adversity builds ingenuity.
Bingo. Yeah. So, and that was a competitive advantage, right? That the school would have. And if you want to go to a school choice conversation, well, that just yields even more value to that conversation. And if anybody wants to dig in more, the great self-promoter that I am. Check out my conversation with Corey Angeles, please.
Yes, definitely. I was reminded of a conversation yesterday where I just wanted to bang my head against the wall because it was like two statists on the far left and right arguing over school choice, and both of their arguments were horrible.
Isn't that fun? When you see that, and I think that's when you kind of achieve pure libertarian thought.
I unlocked achievement level, whatever.
Yeah, this is when we are online, and it's who's the real libertarian? You can have your real libertarian card when you sat back and you watched your friends on the left and right argue, and you're you're both idiots.
Yes.
That's
you
your
cross
moment.
Your arms, lean back in your chair, and put a smug smile on your face. Then you've achieved real libertarianism.
Yeah. And then you can put that in your bio. I am the real libertarian.
Okay. So last really important topic, Brian, and this may fall flat. Have you seen the John Cougar Mellencamp memes?
Okay. So I did. And so, but it's funny, right? I didn't know it was John Cougar Mellencamp.
Wait,
so
what?
No, okay, hear me out, right? So I am not. So I'm in the Facebook group chat that we have for We Are Libertarians, but I'm rarely at all in there. I'm so busy that it goes off nonstop. So I just mute the notifications for a while, and I'll go back and like, was I mentioned? No, okay, go. And then so I start seeing these memes, and I'm like, what are these memes? And I'm like, wait, are these chili dogs? And I'm like, and I'm so confused at this point. And then I start seeing like, people like in the drive up window and like photoshopping Tasty Freeze. And I'm like, chili dogs and Tasty Freeze. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? So then I start like, I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to think to myself. And then I see pictures of John Cougar Mellencamp, if you want to pick one of those names. And I'm like, hold on, wait. And then I realized that it was the song, and then it all hit me. Yeah, and then I was like, oh, this is what this has been this entire time. And this is like over the span of like 3 or 4 days, mind you. This isn't like a 15-minute like revelation. This is me trying to figure this out for an extended period of time.
If you have a moment, go on YouTube and watch the guy singing Jack and Diane. Only the most of the lyrics are sucking on a chili dog.
Is that where this comes from?
It's amazing. I guess it comes from like John Cougar Mellencamp, who's from Indiana, which you and I know, like most of our We Are Libertarians family is from Indy.
Yes. Yep.
And so like, I guess that people take offense at him saying sucking on a chili dog because no one sucks on a chili dog. Maybe he's kind of an asshole. I don't know. My husband lived in Indy for a while and agreed with me. But so I guess people in his fan club got really mad that they're memeing him.
It's a thing. There's a John Cougar Mellencamp fan club. Wow.
Oh yeah. Like, and I guess the memers were taking over it with sucking on a chili dog memes. Anyway, this is what's important in my life. There's liberty, my family, my faith, and sucking on chili dogs, Brian.
I was a big fan of the Tiger King memes back in the day.
Oh, that was, what made Tiger King so successful was the timing. It was the beginning of the lockdown. I mean, I think it would have been successful anyways, to be honest.
But the timing of it was like, we were all like, okay, I guess the world's ending, ? At least we can watch it burn while watching this just complete
Right. We should watch this flaming guy who's hysterical, like raise these tigers and go after some crazy lady. And you know what? It was damn good, and I'm glad I did.
Also, the surprise motherfucker meme is still my favorite meme to use. I love that meme.
Yes.
Guess what, motherfucker?
You know what? Like memes are life, and they're an escape. I think Chris, our dear leader of the network, was talking a little bit about the Cruz memes because people are like defending him, and there's not a damn thing. We're talking about Ted Cruz, by the way, the senator from Texas. But there's not a darn thing he really could have done to change things. But I think it was just a bad look. But I think people are just joking about it because it's freaking funny. Yeah. And people need to let off steam and not take things so seriously. I don't know. I don't know what I would do in my life without humor and memes. So, and actually they kind of brought me around politically. So they made me see the error of my ways.
And it's actually funny you mentioned that. So little sneak peek for the network. So I had Kanan Vitolo on my show, and he's so well known in the greater LP movement just for his memes. And it was, and
I'm sending him a follow.
He had hit one of his memes back with the, I forget what event it was here earlier in the year, but it was on CNN. Chris Cuomo had it on screen, and it was a Kanan Vitolo meme. And it was funny because like that speaks to how, to the other meme that makes the meme's point, modern problems require modern solutions. Right? And that's your average person right now. Their attention span is so limited. Yeah. So how do we take non-aggression principle talk and talking about going down the rabbit hole that is, and make it into a way that your average person can look at it and be like, oh, okay, and then just just scroll through, right? That's the value of like the meme game, and it does have a lot of weight whether people realize it or not.
Oh, it does. And it's basically political cartoons in the internet era. That's what it is, because they've existed for a long time and satires existed for a long time, but it's a way to express an opinion succinctly, quickly, and make people laugh. And there's nothing more powerful than that in my mind. And I do think libertarians have cornered that market. So don't tread on our names, people.
I have an idea. Let's do this.
Yes.
I don't know if somebody wants to take, and I'm going to crowdfund this right now out there to the listeners. So what I want is somebody out there to start to do a collaborative effort where we're going to do basically like a GoFundMe of sorts. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to buy a bunch of billboard space.
And put memes on them?
And put the best libertarian memes that we can possibly find on these billboards. So I want maybe if we can, like one billboard per state. I think that's a really good goal. So whoever's out there that wants to start crowdfunding this, you can come on my show. We'll promote the shit out of it. I am
so on board. They can come on my show. I'm going to attempt to get them on the big show, and I'll get them on stereo as well.
Like, let's do it. Like, come on. Like, this is, and this is, and this is just where my brain sometimes goes, because like this is like the things that will work. Like this is how your average person, like driving down the road and they see a meme every single day, they're gonna be like, okay, hold on, I gotta look this up. Like if they see this they're
Can
like,
you imagine the boomers that don't really do social media and stuff or don't understand it, seeing memes, they'll be like, what is this cartoon? What is this?
Exactly. And like that's great, because if they start to say, hold on, let me look this up, or tell me more, that's when the conversation starts. So let's do that. That's I think that's a great
I'm on board, Brian. We're actually going to chit chat about this.
I like it. Let's do it.
Right. Okay. So it looks like, oh gosh, we're rounding out an hour. So Brian, what are you working on right now? Where can people find you? What do you want people to know? What's your favorite color?
Oh, girl. All right. Well, sorry. My favorite color it's like a turquoise blue. Big fan of that color. Have been for quite a while. I don't know why.
I'll allow it.
Right. All right. I appreciate it. What have I been doing, Trisha? I don't know sometimes how I have time to sleep. I've been so busy. We are doing 3 shows per week over at the Brian Nichols Show.
Yeah, I saw that, which is a huge investment in time, and good for you. A lot of podcasters, that's what builds an audience, to be honest.
And that's what my show, really, that's why I went that route, is because the show, I saw the numbers. They've been rising up for the past 2.5 years, and I kind of had a moment there in August of last year where I said, well, what's next? Like, what are we doing here? We were doing once a week at that point in time, and we were having conversations with folks once a week. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, but like, what am I doing? Like, what's the point? So in August of last year, I made a really big 180. And in my show, we kind of changed the focus from just talking about politics to getting this stuff into people's minds. How do we sell liberty to your average person so they can, take it away and actually start to do some action items in their own personal lives, be that the political process in their own individual life, making their lives better, whatever it may be, right? So I made that a point in August that we were going to start focusing the show on what we called Sell Liberty. So we did that. We started adding on 3 days a week. I started behind the scenes on my end, building up a phenomenal team. And I cannot thank my team enough, doing graphic design, helping with audio, PR, marketing. So
they're doing a great job, because it's super professional looking. It's great. Like you stand apart from other Liberty podcasters. So.
Thank you. Hunter Wynn is my graphics design guy. He's been killing it there. I got Bill Reichlin. If people are ever interested, if they're doing audio work and they're looking for an absolutely phenomenal audio guy, email him, william@dbpodaudio.com, or email me and I'll hook you up with Bill. I got Frankie Abel. She's been doing fantastic work helping with PR and marketing on her end. Also, she does work on her end for a nonprofit. So, she's been fighting the good fight on her end. And it's super important that we have folks. And also, I can't forget my wonderful wife, who's been trying to help, keep me in line with all these shows, because my schedule has been crazy. So it's like trying to, first, my problem, I think, and this is something we can all learn to do better, is I was trying to do everything. I was trying to be my marketing guy. I was trying to be my PR guy. I was trying to be my audio guy. And I realized what I can do is I can go out and have more of these conversations, go on more shows, try to talk to more people, and get more content out there that people are going to be, sharing, engaging with, and really taking away some action items, some real tangible things that they can do. So as we've been doing that, like I said, 3 days a week, we're having awesome conversations with folks from politics to C-level executives, noted entrepreneurs, activists, and all that in between. And what we're trying to do is focus on how can we take these ideas that we talk about every single day and break them down into easy to digest snippets of information that people can really say, okay, that makes sense. I see the value in what we're talking about. We're focusing on telling stories, focusing on the wins that we've had, not just electorally, but also in terms of policy. And I think also one of the things that I've kind of figured out my role in this has been, in this greater liberty movement, has been best helping connect people. So I've been really excited. I mean, I just had my good friend, Mark Walczyk. He's an assemblyman from New York State, who he started a Kick the Crown campaign to, he was the first assemblyman in New York State to stand up and say, enough of this, back in the end of last year, against Cuomo and the executive orders. Yeah. And I was on Larry's show last week, and I said, Larry, you got to talk to Mark. And I was able to hook them up. And now, Mark is leading this campaign. They're looking to possibly impeach Cuomo. So I know he's one of the main voices there, focusing on stuff like that. So it's this is how we can, make a difference. And this is how I'm trying to make a difference. So if folks want to learn more, BrianNicholsShow.com, you can go ahead, find every single episode. We have 200 plus amazing episodes from, like I said, Corey DeAngelis was episode 200, talking about the value of school choice. We're recording here today on Sunday, the 21st. On Monday, I have a conversation with Jack Kerfoot. He's a scientist, and he focuses on climate science. And we actually talked about finding alternative forms of energy through his industry experience, and what a topical conversation with all that's happening in Texas. It's been a really exciting ride. And for folks who want to follow me on social media, they can follow me at B Nichols Liberty. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Minds.com, and the Resurrected Parlor. So at B Nichols Liberty, and then email me, Brian. No, you're good. Brian at BrianNicholsShow.com.
Awesome. Brian, you are a consummate professional, and I enjoy talking to you. Thank you for what you do for liberty. You really put a lot of effort and work and time into it, and you produce a great show. So I am glad to have you on the side of liberty.
Tricia, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And all the work you do as well. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, Brian. And for those of you listening, you've found me already, but you can find me at Tricia Stewart Mann on all social media. You can find my podcast, Gingerarchy, wherever podcasts are. Just go to We Are Libertarians, the Chris Spangle Show, and you can find my show, Brian's show, and a bunch of other awesome ones there. So I will close saying what I do most of the time when I'm being inappropriate. Say peace and love and fuck the state.